Petróchilos. What you have, the issues you have actually put on the table are quite important. Now, I would like to introduce you, Mr. Tsalemis, for a second round. What does your ministry think about providing support to specific renewable energy resources, biogas, solar panels, etc.? It is true that there's a deficit
in the use of biogas, but not for electricity, but the fact is that the support of the ministry and the framework is more than favorable, and there's pricing, there's priority in the grid, there's a repowering option which is very favorable. It's been recently established in the law because we found that this was a way the use of biogas was helping the use of electricity generation, and it had a very favorable environmental footprint, because otherwise this biogas would be released in the atmosphere. But for me, what needs to happen, because in electricity production there are many interested parties with economies of scale here. Mr. Petróchilos said about half a megawatt, we couldn't go any higher than that, but there are larger players, and we need to transform it into methane and use it through the fuel pipes, and that's something that we are examining. We have the Committee for Hydrogen and other gases, so this is where we are starting to deal with this. Even though biogas and biomethane is a technology that's been used for many years, perhaps it's also a European direction, a European way to move forward to use biogas in the biomethane methane system, something that we need to see ahead of us. Yes, there are many benefits and many ways to promote this idea. Spiros, you are also part of the Hydrogen Committee. You participate in the White Dragon project. How do you see it in terms of the technology, in terms as a potential investor, whether we're talking about hydrogen or green gas or biogas? It's an important part. However, it's a technology that even financially speaking is not mature yet. And in terms of its mechanics, in terms of the science, there are problems that need to be overcome right now, talking about hydrogen. When we look at this green hydrogen for consumption at our refineries, because you know that the largest consumers of hydrogen are refineries, so it's something that we can use, and you don't really need any extensive grids to networks to use it. However, the electrolyzers, the way to produce hydrogen, are very small compared to the hundreds of megawatts that are needed to cover the needs of a refinery. What's more, for the rest of the gases, the green gases, where we do look at them in the context of the new technologies, the potential to manage or to produce them. To date, we are not at the point to have the raw material on the one side, because it is important to have the raw material to produce any type of biogas. So if it's of biological origin, it's difficult to transport it. It's not available in large quantities. You cannot have large production plants. You have to have small decentralized ones. And on the other hand, you have to overcome problems when you are dealing with large quantities. However, there are solutions other than injecting it into the natural gas network. You can use it to feed transports. But talking about hydrogen, which might appear a bit exotic right now, it's something that if we invest as a country, we're going to win a lot of things on the side of innovation. The hydrogen part of it has a lot of potential to develop in the future. And the White Dragon, which is a very innovative project, and almost the entire energy industry participates in it, and we're trying to develop what benefits we have, but also it gives the opportunity to young researchers, to young engineers, to engineering firms to develop and move past all the problems that we're facing right now, either individually or working with European programs. We are promoting the R&D community right now through these projects. Mr. Petrochilos, the design, in terms of raw material, could we have 500 megawatts of natural gas, of biogas? No, at this point, no. Of course, the question is, biogas comes from the industry, the Greek industry, so you have to create waste in order to get it. If we had such waste, perhaps biogas could be a solution. We could predict 300 megawatts of power, decentralized, of course, or small-scale, different small-scale production units. We had a large project that has fallen behind, and it could create 20 megawatts of power. But we do have problems, like we said, the reactions of the local people, the lack of information, the lack of information regarding RES creates such reactions. So we could have bio projects decentralized on islands as well. I cannot forget the case of the island of Naxos. They produce great cheese. We tried to use biogas, but there was a tremendous reaction. But if you think in the end, the entire plant might shut down because biogas did not happen, because right now the European Union says that you need to have carbon neutral facility, and without the biogas you cannot achieve it. After the comment on Naxos, let me ask Mr. Papathanasiou, the part of the plants on the islands. Can you tell us a bit more about how you see things and how they can progress? Yes, of course. It's a pending matter starting from 2016 and forward. We don't have a support scheme for hybrid plants on the islands. The model of 3468, that model was not successful, and in the last 5 years, as a country, we are looking for a new support scheme. I think that this new support scheme will soon be approved, and it will provide for tenders per insular complex and per hybrid station, meaning a combination of RES and storage. They will work as a virtual power plant. The logic behind this new scheme is on the basis of the produced RES energy, not recycling of energy through the grid, and the right to develop such projects will come at the lower price, the lowest price of energy being produced. And it is important to say that in view of the interconnections of the islands, we have an open question, because it is a project that is being developed in an environment of non-interconnected islands. And how can you move into an interconnected environment? That's the open question. The logic with these projects is to have the legislative framework and the rational approach to say that the support that the plant is receiving through the tender, because the framework for the operation of the hybrid plants is not ideal right now, but this station can either transform into an RES and storage system plant, or if the RES and the storage unit are installed in different parts and connected to different parts of the grid, it could be converted into a portfolio of RES and storage, as all the portfolios that we visualize will have in the future. So many open questions from what you say. For example, how can an investor make a decision knowing the plan for the interconnection of certain islands, but not being certain how fast this plan is going to be implemented? Another question has to do with the cost for maintaining such plans, because it's easy to say that they can be maintained, but we have not tried them in practice. And seeing the experience from abroad, we see that you need to have maintenance, you need to have visits from specialized personnel, which is not going to be available on such small islands. You are correct in everything that you say. First, it would be critical, the time of the interconnection would be critical if after the interconnection the price is not the same. But if the price remains the same, then it's not so critical to know when interconnection is going to take place. The second question, if you do tenders that are separate per system, then you resolve this problem. The same technology, when it's being implemented on an island, it has a different cost depending on the size and on the insular complex. So tenders need to be separate. Another issue, the cost beyond the initial investment is something that needs to be considered by the investor at the time when they enter the tender, and of course you cannot resolve it up front. I have two questions now. Which investor would be interested in a 200 kilowatt system at a remote island in order to participate in a tender and compete in a tender? Just to look at it realistically, it's not easy, I say, answering my own question. It's not easy to open this market if we don't have support. It's more of a social work than an investor decision, unless I'm mistaken. Please let me know. I will let Mr. Karidas answer by saying that, and I will only say this, that the interest of the investor shows that despite those concerns, this is something viable. We need to establish the conditions, as Mr. Risopoulos said, so that the projects can be sustainable. Otherwise, it will be fictitious, the investor's interest, and that has a negative impact on the market, on society as well. In order to implement any size of a project, either 200 megawatt or on an island, on the mainland, or 200 kilowatt on an island, the conditions must reassure the investor that sooner or later they will get the return they are looking for. The other thing is that we know that in the past, the condition of the market was such that promoted a specific procedure for licensing, or it was a situation that we had delays, and Right now, we have many licenses that have been approved on the islands or for offshore projects. What is happening? How do you see things happening on the with regard to the tenders regarding the islands? Will only some players will participate, or those players that already have licenses from the past, or maybe they have some investments on the islands as well? How do you see it? Will the tenders be open to everyone? I would say Mr. Tsalems should answer this question. Yeah, it's an open question for everyone because we don't really have a lot of time left. I would say I can only pose one rule. Seeing the investment interest and how mature it is in each case. If, for example, in an insular complex, there is no investor interest, there are no eligible projects, then what can we ask for? Should we let things progress? No, we need from the start, at a non-mature stage, to have a tender, and whoever wins, they can proceed. But if we have a stage where projects are already mature, then we need to progress with those. It doesn't make any sense to have another tender and someone else wins the tender, but they don't have the license to proceed. So it's there's no one single answer to this question. I agree. Our group has a license for an offshore project 10 years now. We have made some surveys, some studies. We expect a new legislative framework. But if we want to have fast penetration of the RAS, we need to look at mature projects and see if they can be implemented faster than going through, again, the initial stages for new projects. So since we don't have a lot of time, maybe Mr. Petrochilos, Mr. Varlamis, Mr. Kiadzis, if you have something else to add. Practically speaking, the nominal power right now for the photovoltaic parks is on the DC part. This has to change. We need changes like that. We need to move to AC. Also, a park that has the field, the available field, or the area to establish the photovoltaic park, maybe 100 megawatts or 300 megawatts. Perhaps in the future they will be able to add the storage plant and be more productive. Yes, 100 megawatts from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening, because I have a storage facility as well, and with a lower construction cost. These are changes that can take place tomorrow and will help the market accelerate things because they can be easily implemented. We need to rationalize the legislation because there's going to be a lot of reaction regarding the grid and who gets the power. So it may be more fair to distribute it to smaller investments and larger investments, so there's some kind of uniformity. This is something that we're going to deal with in the next year. Thank you everyone very much. I hope that our discussion was fruitful and has added something to our concerns and to what we are talking about. And I hope to see all these developments shortly before us. Thank you again to the Energy Press for the invitation and for the very interesting discussion with our panelists.